right, here we go.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Summer Meyers. I'm a homeschool mom of 6 kids, and on this channel we talk about all things homeschool. And today I wanted to do a review and flip through of RightStart Math Level A. So I have been doing RightStart Math now for 4 years, 3 years. How many years have I been doing this? And this upcoming year will be the beginning of our 4th year. I've also done Level A twice now. I'm now starting again with my semi-youngest, my kindergartner, upcoming kindergartner. And so I am very familiar with Level A. So I mostly wanted to do a flip through review. I also wanted to talk about why I love it and when you want to start with Level A.
All right, let's go ahead and do a flip through of Level A. So here are the main objectives of things you're going to accomplish in Level A. It's broken down into quarters 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm just going to say now that this is mostly a reference, so you can find out if your child is struggling with place value addition. You can go back and look and see, oh, okay, this is where it is. It's mostly covered in quarter 1. I'll be able to find it easily that way. Otherwise, I don't even notice the quarters, to be frank. Numeration. So numeration it's a bit of number sense. So you're going to be able to, by the end of this, group objects and identify them. So you're going to be able to see 3 tiles and say, okay, that's the number 3. And this is going to be grouping in 5s and 10s. You're going to know even numbers, odd numbers, being able to count 1 through 100, but also being able to count by 2s to 100, 5s to 100, and 10s to 100. So there's skip counting introduced at the very beginning. You're going to also talk about money. It's just penny, nickel, and dime. And the reason why they start with just these 3 instead of including the quarter, I believe, is because they like to mix learning about money with numeration and place value. So you can say, okay, I've got 3 pennies and I add 1 more penny. That gives me 4 because 3 pennies is a numeration of 1. So they mix this understanding and learning with all the other math concepts that are introduced in this level. I love the way RightStart does place value, first of all. Lots of math programs have various ideas and techniques. RightStart's approach is with the abacus. This goes back to numeration and being able to identify groups of 5, groups of 10, and being able to play with those patterns. But this also contributes to knowing place value very thoroughly when you're using an abacus. When you can say, okay, there's 10 ones, 10 groups of 1 bead, or 1 group of 10 beads, there we go, will equal 110. And then if we add 10 tens or 10 groups of 10, you will get 100. And they do that with the abacus. And children clearly can understand. And by later levels, they can actually visualize an abacus in their brain, which gives them a very good, solid foundation of place value, which leads to really strong concepts of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, because they can see how the numbers move in their minds. The big thing that RightStart is famous for is talking about 3, 10, 7, as opposed to calling it 37. When we are learning how to count, the English language is interesting in that it says you go 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 10, and then you have this weird transition where you have 12, 13, 14. The teens are very strange. And then the pattern picks up again with 21, 22, 20. There's a rhythm to it. But there's a break between 10 and 20 where you've got these weird teen numbers. And when you're learning how to count and when you're learning how to add those teens, it's confusing in a lot of ways. And the English language is pretty much the only one that does this. Anyway, the point being that instead of referring to a teen number like 12, instead of referring to it as 12, it would be referred to as 1, 10, 2. The example here given in the objectives is 37 or 3, 10, 7. And the reason behind this is that you can manipulate those 3 groups of 10. So if you are subtracting it with another large number like 10, you can say, okay, well, 3, 10, 7, I can take one of those 10s away, and now I only have 2 10s left with some 7 left over, and that's the 1s. It gives you a solid understanding of moving numbers around mentally. A lot of parents are hesitant about teaching their children using this method of referring to numbers this way. By the end of level A, they will be calling numbers their regular names, the regular number way, 37. They won't be referring to it as 3, 10, 7 for the rest of their lives. It's just giving them a sense of place value. And in fact, by the middle of A, all of my kids dropped it. They still talk about it actually in level B, but it's more of a point of reference than actually calling it that number. You're also going to be introduced to very basic addition. So you're going to be doing parts and a whole. You see this a lot in other math programs. RightStart calls it the part whole circle. So you have a large circle that demonstrates the whole number, and then it's broken down into 2 parts. The reason why you do this is to give them an understanding of math number relationships. So if you understand your part whole circle in addition, then you're going to understand it in subtraction. If you understand how the numbers are broken apart and then come back together. We then have subtraction. This is very gentle. You're just figuring out the number relationships. Problem solving, you're also going to have a little bit of word problem solving. Geometry, this is probably my favorite part of level A. This is learning different shapes like triangle, rectangle, and circle. This is kind of that pre-K concept. You're also going to be talking about 3D shapes like cubes, cylinders, spheres, and they actually have manipulatives that they can control and move around, and it's fabulous. I love those lessons. Time is introduced. However, it's primarily looking at a calendar and understanding the days of the week and the changing of time and seasons. There's songs that go with it. It's less about the clock, even though the clock is introduced very later on at the very end. Measurement is talked about, but also it's not a big thing right at the moment. This is more in progressive levels. And then fractions. So measurement and fractions is introduced on a very superficial level, but it gives the children a chance to have vocabulary. And so when you go more in depth in later levels, like level B, level C, they don't feel quite so blindsided. It's not a new concept. They already kind of understand how it works. Here is a list of materials that are needed that are not included in the RightStart math set. They're all just very basic, generic things. I've never had to go over this list and buy stuff preemptively. It's like a blank sheet of paper, stapler, sticky notes. These are all things, household items that you will already have on hand. This is an essay written by Joan Cotter, who developed RightStart, about how it was developed. She talks about why she uses 3, 10, 7. It's very interesting, well worth the read, and I think it's actually available on the website. Here's some more general thoughts on teaching math. This is excellent to read even if you don't use RightStart. I think there's a lot of good points and interesting things to think about in this. Let's see. Briefly, I'm going to mention the second edition. The second edition is well worth the purchase. I know you can get the first edition for very cheap on eBay, and it's not going to hurt you. There's nothing wrong with it. However, the second edition is much more efficient in how it is laid out, and it's well worth the extra purchase. And then here is a breakdown of what the daily lessons are and why they're set up this way, but I will go ahead and we'll show you that in a second. Here's the table of contents. There are 132. There are 132 lessons in level A. There are not scheduled. So there isn't a list, oh, okay, this is what you do on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It's all very much like you do one lesson a day and you just move through the book until you are finished. I like this setup because it takes the pressure off of me as a homeschool mom, because I don't feel like I have a looming deadline. I have to complete this by the end of the week, and it's not thrown off if I do miss a lesson or something happens or whatever. It is also laid out so if you need to continue working with the lesson, you can expand it. You can make it longer and sit in that lesson for a week. If your lesson goes really quickly, you can do 2 or 3 lessons in a day, and I like the way RightStart has set it up that way. Here is lesson 1. I want to talk about lesson 4 though. So let's go ahead and flip through. You'll see it's all black and white. This is a teacher's guide, not a student guide. So primarily this is just sitting in front of you and you're having a discussion about math with your child. And I love that. I love that you're talking it out, that you are actively engaged together. This does mean that it's a little more teacher intensive. Here's lesson 4, subsidizing 5. So that's the title of it. It talks about the objectives and what exactly you're going to be doing, as well as the materials. So for the objective, you are subsidizing 5. You are identifying counting 1 to 5 objects without counting. So you see a group of 3 and you're like, oh, that's 3 instead of 1, 2, 3. That's part of the numeration that we've talked about. You're also practicing sorting. Then we have our materials. You have finger cards, tiles, tally sticks, and multiplication cards. Multiplication cards just means skip counting cards. So the cards are set up with, it's using 2, so each card has 2, and then the next one 4, 6, 8, 10, and that's all it is. The lesson is set up where you have your speaking portion here, and then they have an explanation portion here on the side. The explanation tends to go more in depth of why you're teaching it this way. It also sometimes has additional thoughts about teaching it that way or how to teach it. Sometimes it references and says you are allowed to use the abacus if they want it, if they ask for it or whatever. So, and it's never super clumsy or, it doesn't ever take up this entire column. It's not overwhelming at all. The lesson begins with a standard warm-up. For level A, a lot of it is reading Yellow is the Sun. So let's look at that. This is Yellow is the Sun. It is a counting book that you sing along during the beginning of your lesson typically. It shows what a finger card looks like. It shows what it looks like on the abacus and also drawing it with your hand. Typically, I just read it and sing along, and they sing it with me and they show it with their hands. Goes all the way up to 5, and then it repeats itself. So my whole hand makes 5, and then you go back to Yellow is the Sun, and then I like how they break it up. They go 6 is 5 and 1. And so it's at the very beginning, breaking down 6. 6 is not that big. Actually, it's just 5 and then you're doing 1 again. 7 is 5 and 2. 8 is 5 and 3. So I would like to point out that your child will know and understand the number before they can actually write the number. They'll be able to identify the number pretty quickly, but it's not as focused about the symbol of the numeral 9, the letter 9, whatever you want to call it. It's more focused on identifying 9 and how 9 looks and what we can do to split it apart and put it back together and manipulating it and moving around. And I think that really helps when you are approaching new math concepts like addition and subtraction. 10 is 5 and 5. There we go. It continues on. The song is over, but you can also look at it here. At the very back of the book, they have the music for the song Yellow is the Sun. I actually don't know how the song goes. I just sing it the way my heart wants to sing it. But if you can play, you can actually play the song. They also have it on chords, and I'm pretty sure they have an audio version that you can download on their website if you would like, if you feel so inclined. So Yellow is the Sun. So for the warm-up, we sing Yellow is the Sun, and then we do a little bit of finger play. Here we have some games where you're moving tiles around and tally sticks, and it looks like you're playing with your finger card. This is all scripted out, so I literally just read it, and the answers will be in brackets if there's a question involved or whatever. So everything is just right there, handy for you to reference. Then they also have, it looks like, a game. So let's look at the yellow card games book, which is this. And so when you are looking for a game in your lesson, here's our game and 2 finger in card order. So it gives you an objective of what the game is going to be about, how many players, what cards you need, how it's going to be laid out, and how do you play it. If you do the game and you're like, that didn't give us enough practice, there are other games right next to it, and you can reference the objectives in all of these games to see which one is going to meet your child's needs. Or if the game is boring and you don't want to do that one, there's other options that you can look at. So I love that it's set up in a way that I can go and reference these games and say, okay, we need to expand on this lesson and hang out for a week. I absolutely can do that with these games. Or if I want, I don't have to do the game, and if by next week they've forgotten about it, we can go back and reference that game again, no problem. So here we're doing some kind of a sorting and ordering, another pattern game. And then you have the conclusion here. So again, if the lesson went really fast, I might just move on to the next lesson and skip the conclusion, skip the game, and just keep going. If the lesson is going really, really slow, I'll split the lesson up into 2-3 days and then do the conclusion to make sure that they've got it solid. And the conclusion is very short, and it's just basically a review just to make sure that your child understands what they were talking about and what they learned about that day. All right, just continuing on our flip through. It's black and white. It's not super colorful. And I appreciate that because I don't want them looking at the book. I want them looking at me and us talking about it. I love how it's laid out, and I love how simple it is to follow through. And the fact that it is basically the same thing laid out every day, where you have your warm-up and then you have your lesson, then you have you've got some kind of a game usually, and then your conclusion. It kind of gives me an idea of how long I want a lesson to take and how long I want the game to last, and how long it's going to be a part of our day. I'd also like to add, if you are teaching RightStart with multiple children, absolutely ask them to come and join you when you are playing a game. Frequently, I'll get one child started and we'll do our lesson and our warm-up, and there'll be some kind of a game that they need to play. Here we go, we've got a geoboard triangle game. I'll ask an older sister to come over and say, hey, can you play this game with them? I'm going to get the next one going. So currently I have 4 that are using RightStart, and so I can have 3 of them playing a game while I am doing number 4 with her RightStart. And then we just kind of rotate through. Here's our workbook. The workbook is very thin. There isn't a whole lot to it. In fact, I think there might be 41. There's like 46. There's just, less than 50 pages of worksheet work in here. And the majority of the worksheet work is actually like manipulations and cutting out, and less about writing. So here you've got some rectangles, and you're going to cut them out and manipulate them for the week. Here's an actual worksheet where you're actually writing. Again, it is not in color. Here's a little bit of enumeration where you are adding 2 groups of 2 and 2, and that would give you 4. And it's nice because they're actually using, instead of the number 2, they're using the tally sticks, which you have been manipulating and playing with for the entire week or whatever. And so this is easily understandable to them to add them together. It makes much more sense when you are adding actual groups of objects as opposed to 2 visual numbers. Here's a worksheet where you're cutting out triangles. These triangles are in groups of 10, and so you're putting your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 for your fractal triangle. Here is some actual handwriting practice and what that looks like. Here we go, we've got our fractal triangles again. So these are groups of 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 10. And we've got 10 of those. And so we're going to cut them out, and I assume there's a triangle at the next side. Cut them out and then put them here, which will give us, if we've got 10 tens, that will give us 100. And manipulating that. Here you are, you're going to cut these shapes out, and we're going to fold them, and talking about congruent. Here's some more handwriting practice. Let's see, let's look at some addition problems here. So this is later on. This is worksheet 16. but it's also split into 2 sections. So what's going to happen is this is going to be lesson 30 and this is going to be lesson 31. And so you don't do the entire worksheet in one day. It's split up, and this will actually be more than enough review for your child. You don't have to do an entire worksheet worth by way of review. You'll also notice that it isn't stacked. This is, again, RightStart's way of focusing on mental math and getting them familiar with adding things in their head. Got some more. Here's beads, and we're manipulating those. So there aren't any cute little watercolor animals or flowers or anything. It's very bare bones, but I like how straightforward it is. I'm sorry, I slammed that down. I like how straightforward it is. You're going to be writing out 1 through 100 and practicing using this worksheet that you have written out, skip counting and finding groups of 10 and groups of 5 and finding new patterns within your 1 through 100 worksheet. So it's not like you just do a worksheet and then it's like set aside and you never look at it again. They reference it a lot back again in level A. Oh, here's the fractal triangle again, where you've got a fractal triangle of 100, and now they've got 10 groups of 100. And so they're going to be introducing that for your 1000 triangle, and how fun is that? We didn't get a chance to talk about assessment, so let me talk about that right now. Fairly frequently throughout RightStart, there'll be an assessment. And that means for that day, you're going to be doing a worksheet that is going to be a review of the last 20 or 30 lessons or however many. And anything that they struggle with in the assessment, it's very easy to say, okay, we had trouble finding all the rectangles and what that means, so let's go back to the lesson that talks about this, and we'll either do the lesson over again or we'll look to see if there's a game associated with that lesson. And it's very easy to find and adjust in that way. I will say that I've very rarely had an assessment and my kids are like, have failed it completely. I'm pretty sure that has never happened. Once or twice, there's been a couple of concepts where they didn't remember, didn't understand or whatever, and then we went and reviewed it. But RightStart is so thorough, and it's very easy to see clearly what they're struggling with, that by the time the assessment rolls around, they breeze through it. There's mastery completion. They know and understand the concepts very thoroughly. The math journal. So they also have a grid. This is true for all of RightStart's levels. They have a math journal, and it's just a grid that they can write the numbers in. So even if you don't do RightStart, I'd highly recommend getting a graphing journal. For littles, make sure the squares are nice and big. But the reason being, it's so easy to organize the numbers, and it's so easy to lay out equations and seeing how the numbers are formed in a square as opposed to just freehanding it on a line. So I like the way that RightStart has this included. So whenever there's any kind of written work, which isn't very often in level A, we go to our math journal, and my little pre-K and K kids can easily do and write the numbers in these squares. And so that is the workbook. Now that we've done the flip through and you've seen kind of how the lessons are laid out, I wanted to talk specifically about what manipulatives you are going to be using for level A. And manipulatives, it comes in a big box, and if you plan on doing this for the long haul, it's absolutely worth it to get the entire set. Don't shy away from that. There are things that you're not going to use, so if you're really penny pinching, these are the ones you need specifically. But ultimately, it would be cheaper just to get the whole thing in the long run if you plan on doing the next few levels. All right, so I have my list here. I'm going to go ahead and read it out. You need 6 decks of cards. These are different sets of cards that have different games and different roles in playing, and I mentioned that briefly in the flip through. You need place value cards, abacus tiles, fraction charts, your dry erase board, the geo boards,
geometric solids, plastic coins, colored tiles, the geometry reflector, the calculator. Now, you could scrimp and say, okay, well, I've already got a calculator. This calculator specifically, they talk about the different buttons. So even if you're using a calculator that you didn't buy from RightStart, probably okay, but they're going through with the intention of showing your child how to use their specific calculator and what different buttons do. So for that reason, I wouldn't skip out on that calculator unless you really need to. The geared clock, math balance, tangrams, centimeter cubes, and tally sticks. Oh my gosh, they're so loud. I'll tell you why I don't like filming in here. One, there's a huge echo because this is just like super tall. And the other reason is because it's just all the noise sort of filters in from the rest of the house into here. Also, I was gonna film in the dining room, but we're doing a puzzle in there. So we're in here, my homeschool room. Sorry. All right, so let's talk about what is age appropriate for RightStart Level A. A lot of families like starting this in the preschool age range. So I've heard people starting this at the age of 3 and very gently, passing it through, 3, 4, and 5. And then finishing it off just as they turn 5 and starting their kindergarten year with level B. That being said, if your child is already 5 and you're like, wait, does that mean I start level B? You really want to do the assessment that's associated with RightStart. And that'll tell you kind of where you are at and where your child should start. I would also just not skip level A. I love level A. Level A gives your child a very, very strong foundation in number sense. So yes, it's very easy and they'll probably blow through it really fast, but not necessarily. With my middle child, my third one, my number 3, she took about 1.5 years, almost 2 years to get through level A. And it wasn't because she was not grasping the concepts, it's just that we took our time and we enjoyed playing the games, and I made sure that she was solid before we moved on. So if you were in a preschool age, maybe 4 and 5, level A, perfect. For kindergarten, if you're starting it with kindergarten, it's very easy to get through the lessons quickly. I think that is really important when you are a wiggly 5-year-old. You want to get through math lessons quickly. Schooling with kindergarten should be very short. It shouldn't take 8 hours during the day, or 6 hours. I guess that's a more reasonable time. It should take only about an hour to do all of your work, and level A is very gentle enough that you can get through it very quickly. So if that's something important to you, I would consider that as well. If you've taken the assessment and they know their numbers 1 through 100, and they are ready and just, they want more with math, go for level B, man. Don't worry about it. It will be fine. Go for level B and really enjoy and sink your teeth into that math. It's just as gentle. And I am going to have a review of level B coming up next week. So if you are kind of on the fence with which one to start with, level A or level B, look for that video, subscribe and get notified, and then you'll be able to see which one you would like to start with. I'm also going to mention that I did a review of all of RightStart last year when I first started this YouTube channel, and I just watched it over just to remind myself of the things I said and did. And it wasn't a flip through, which is why I'm doing this series this year. But if you want to see an actual lesson and how long it takes to do a lesson and what that looks like when you're sitting with your child, I'm going to have that linked up above so you can check out and see how a lesson works and how quickly it goes through. And just familiarize yourself with that. And that's separated out with level A, B, C, D, and I think I might even go up to E. So check that out and you can see kind of a full scale of what RightStart is headed into. And I want to say that these lessons are done in real time so you can kind of see how long it takes. I want to talk a little bit about why I love RightStart so much. I have tried a couple of different math programs before landing on this one, and I love this because of how it approaches the whole child. I think it is excellent for kinesthetic learners because they are manipulating these objects to give them a real sense of what numbers can do. And I think RightStart does that brilliantly throughout all of the levels, not just, the first early math levels, which I think is a little unusual for higher levels of math. I think it is excellent for auditory learners because it does teach you how to think of math mentally. Children who are naturally inclined to mentally move numbers around, this program does a really good job showing them physically, but also just listening to it, and they can catch it quickly, and it doesn't hold those mental learners back. So it also is excellent for visual learners. I'm going to put a little disclaimer here because it does focus so much on mental math. Visual learners could struggle with this. I have one or two visual learners who can read something and they just get it instantly. There aren't a ton of just worksheets and workbooks where they read it and then they can understand it. So I can see, as a child, if I had to do this math, it might have been a little bit more of a struggle because I'm a very visual learner. However, because I can manipulate it and see the numbers with the tiles, with the tally sticks, with the, the money or whatever, that's not too much of a concern. However, when you are doing the warm-ups and you are asking your kid, what is 3 plus 5 or what is 10 plus 2 or whatever, you're not showing them what it is. It's all verbal. If you have a visual learner and they're struggling with that, absolutely write it down on a whiteboard. It's okay. It's not going to hurt them, and it's not going to affect the math program. I've done this enough of my children who are visual learners to realize that eventually they do get the mental math. And it's all right for me to write it down. So that's one of the biggest reasons why I love RightStart, is because I do think it helps all children of all learning styles. It is a spiral mastery-based approach. So most people would look at RightStart and say, oh, it's spiral. It's spiral. Spiral means they introduce a concept and then they pull back and then they come back to it and then they pull back and then they come back to it. This is good for children who are bored easily and are ready to move on to the next thing or whatever. Mastery-based is where you are sitting there and you absorb one thing. And once you get that whole concept of addition or the whole concept of time or the whole concept of whatever, then you move on to the next thing. RightStart is a bit of a mix of both. It jumps around in the sense that it does not follow standard school, public school, what's the word? Take a water break while I'm trying to think of the word. Timeline. It does not follow the standard school timeline where you learn multiplication in 3rd grade and where you are introduced to, algebra in 8th grade or whatever. It tends to introduce all of these subjects at once and builds a slow foundation up to it. So you're actually going to see a little bit of multiplication theory. I don't know if that's the right word, but you're going to see a foundation of that set up in level A, although you're not going to get really hard into it until level D. So it's spiral-based, meaning it introduces these concepts throughout the levels and building foundation skills up until you reach your full mastery. It does have plenty of practice. So it gives you time to sit and enjoy those foundational skills, gaining mastery through playing the games and gaining mastery in manipulations with the math manipulatives that it provides. So I love RightStart. I love how it is set up. I think it is very well thought out. I have been doing this for 3 years now. I think the reason why my kids are so successful at math is because we have sat in a math program for a long time. We haven't been jumping from one math program to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. When you're switching between programs, that tends to slow you down a bit. And that can be scary, especially with math, because you're like, why don't they know it? Why don't they know it? Okay, it must be the curriculum, and you move on to something else. If you are in the middle of something, give yourself time to really figure out what's wrong with it before dropping it completely and moving on to the next thing. The reason why RightStart has been so successful in our home is because we have been doing it for a couple of years. And so that first year we did RightStart, it was a little bit of slow going. It took us a while before those lessons really moved fast and quick because we were learning about how the curriculum was going to fit in our home. And that is true for every math curriculum that you're going to find. There's going to be a learning curve where you are understanding what makes it work and what doesn't. If you do end up getting RightStart and you're like, this isn't exactly what I was hoping for. I was hoping it would be faster. I was hoping it was less teacher intensive. You need to give it time to breathe and time to settle. And I know that's not really an answer that anybody wants to hear, but it is true. And it is a solid program that will help all kinds of learners. That's my testament. And I am not sponsored in any shape or form. I don't get any money from this. I'm a huge fan of this program. And I really enjoy the way it is set up with math. If you're interested in more about my opinions about math and what I think about it, I'm going to have a card linked up above about talking about math and additional resources to help supplement if that is something you are interested in. And that is it. I hope that was helpful. If it was, like, subscribe, talk to me about math, talk to me about what curriculums you're currently using, even if it isn't RightStart. If you are a huge RightStart fan, let me know and tell me why. And if you are researching it and you have additional questions, I answer all my comments. I'm happy to talk about math with anybody. Take it easy, everybody. Bye.